The best wedding gift is you disappearing from our family. Those were the words my daughter-in-law threw at me in her kitchen on the night before her big day. I'm Marion, and in that moment, I had to decide whether to stay silent or take back my dignity. Have you ever been pushed out of your own family celebration? Tell me what you would have done in my place. My daughter-in-law smoothed her wedding gown and said, "The best gift you could give us is disappearing from this family." I almost laughed at the audacity, the sentence landing between us like a plate dropped on tile. The kitchen smelled of buttercream frosting and wilting roses, and for a second, I wondered if the sugar in the air had gone to her head. The brass key on my ring glinted under the light fixture, a faint reminder that I was more than just a guest in this house. Not that anyone else seemed to remember. Sloane's lips pressed into a plastic smile that barely reached her eyes, and Ethan, my son, leaned his shoulder against the refrigerator, staring at nothing in particular. He nodded once, as though his agreement required no words. I stood with my hands resting on the counter, surrounded by mason jars filled with flowers that needed arranging, half-melted ice packs waiting to be replaced, and an open garment bag draped over a chair. The hum of bridesmaids' chatter floated from the living room, punctuated by bursts of laughter. No one out there knew that inside this kitchen, I had just been told to vanish. "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, almost too calm. Sloane shrugged, studying her nails like the French tips were more interesting than my presence. "A hotel. Your sister's. Anywhere but here. Tomorrow is our special day, and you bring negativity." Negativity. I thought of the morning spent trimming roses, the afternoon ferrying supplies, the evening listening to her complaints about the weather and the caterer. Negativity had been the last thing I offered. "Still," Ethan added softly, "it's probably for the best, Mom. We can talk after the honeymoon." After the honeymoon, as though this were a minor scheduling conflict. I swallowed, feeling something in me shift, not crack, but click into place, like a gear aligning. "You're right," I said. "I should go." Sloane blinked, surprised. She must have expected pleading or tears, the kind of theatrics she could later recast as me being difficult. Ethan exhaled in relief, turning back to the refrigerator door as though nothing more needed to be said. I walked upstairs to the room I had been occupying for months. Always called the guest room. Never mine. Guests are temporary, and they had made sure I knew it. I folded clothes into my suitcase, each motion deliberate. On the nightstand sat a photograph of Daniel, my late husband, his smile steady after 40 years of marriage. He had never once made me feel like an intruder. I touched the frame gently. "Don't worry," I whispered. "I'm not going down without a fight." Zipping the suitcase, I listened to muffled voices downstairs. Ethan and Sloane already discussing how they might repurpose the room. An office? A yoga studio? The future of my presence in their lives reduced to interior design options. I carried my suitcase through the hallway, past a rack of floral invoices, and down the stairs without looking back. Outside, the June air was heavy with humidity. I loaded my car, the brass key cool in my palm. This wasn't just a key to their house. It was leverage, though they didn't know it yet. In the driver's seat, I dialed a familiar number. "Grace, it's Marion. I need you to pull the paperwork on the house, all of it." On the other end, Grace Park, my lawyer and steady ally since Daniel's passing, responded without hesitation. "Marion, has something happened?" "Yes," I said simply, my eyes fixed on the glow of the house I had helped pay for. "Everything." Grace's voice steadied me. "I'll review the file. Remember, you're not powerless." "I know," I whispered, though the words felt new on my tongue. I drove across town and checked into the Hampton Inn. The receptionist slid a key card across the desk, and the beige lobby smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and overbrewed coffee. In my room, I set the suitcase on the stand, hung the garment bag in the closet, and folded the hotel receipt carefully into my wallet like a small but official declaration. I had relocated on my own terms. Sitting on the bed, I dialed the number printed on the contract for the Riverbend Country Club. "Yes, this is Marion Carter. I need to cancel tomorrow's wedding reception." The woman on the line hesitated. "Ma'am, the food has already been prepared. The staff—" "I understand," I said, steady and firm. "The contract is under my name. Cancel everything. Charge the cancellation fees to my card." There was a pause, the sound of shuffling papers. "Yes, Mrs. Carter, if that's what you wish." "It is," I replied. For the first time all day, I felt in control. When I hung up, silence pressed around me. A silence not of exclusion, but of choice. I flipped on the TV, muted it quickly, and picked up the room phone to order salmon with asparagus and a small glass of Chardonnay. The tray arrived just as my cell phone lit up on the nightstand. 10 missed calls, all from the house. I set the phone face down, unfolded the napkin, and picked up my fork. The salmon was warm, the asparagus crisp, and for the first time in years, I tasted the satisfaction of a boundary drawn. By sunrise, #wedding canceled was trending across Richmond. Guests adore chaos, especially when the bill lands in someone else's ledger. From my small table in the Hampton Inn Cafe, I watched a news ticker scroll over a muted television while my phone buzzed so violently it threatened to topple into my lukewarm coffee. Photos of bewildered relatives in pastel dresses flooded social feeds. One headline crowed, "Reception pulled hours before vows." I was not surprised. People consume family drama the way they consume brunch mimosas, greedy, amused, careless. Grace's text arrived while the waffle iron beeped behind the counter. "Bring bank statement since 2019. Practical, clipped, sharp as a tailor's shears. Numbers don't cry. Numbers cut." I saved her message, aware that paper would soon bear the weight my voice had failed to carry. Again my phone lit. Sloan, then Ethan, then unknown numbers I assumed were bridesmaids drafted into diplomacy. I let most roll to voicemail. Finally, against my better judgment, I picked up. "Mom," Ethan pleaded. His tone carried the false calm of a man begging an elevator not to stall. "Let's be reasonable. Come back. We can still fix this." "Respect first," I answered, my words clipped like scissors against fabric. "Then talk." And I hung up, letting silence shield me like armor. The welfare check arrived just after breakfast. Detective Javier Ortiz approached with a politeness that suggested he had already guessed the truth. Hat in hand, posture quiet, he asked if we might sit. We chose a corner table beside the cereal dispensers, the scent of burnt coffee hovering between us. His shoes were sensible, his eyes steady, trained to measure both danger and dignity. I handed him a binder already tabbed and weighted with receipts, deeds, and contracts. He leafed through slowly, his fingertips resting on each document as though testing its pulse. Wire transfers, mortgage co-signed, reception contract signed by me alone. He looked up. "Who canceled the event?" "I did." He nodded, not surprised. "Why?" "Because generosity without respect is waste," I said. My voice did not tremble. He asked about medications. I told him. "Vitamin D and stubbornness." A smile flickered before he set the binder down. "You're competent," he said simply. "They're dependent." His verdict was mercifully plain. He left his card with deliberate care. "Call me if they push further." Then he left, his exit quiet, no theatrics, just assurance. Later that morning, at the cafe counter, Caroline Whitaker appeared in pressed linen, pearls fastened neatly at her throat. She carried herself with poise, but her eyes betrayed fatigue. "Marion," she said gently, asking if she might join me. The untouched biscotti on her saucer spoke louder than her words. We traded honesty over weak coffee. She confessed she had spoiled Sloan for decades, funding tantrums, smoothing storms, disguising entitlement as privilege. Marriage hasn't matured her. It has magnified her worst instincts, Caroline admitted. Her hands trembled as she folded a napkin. I cannot fix what she refuses to respect. For once, I believed her. She vowed not to rescue Sloane with more money, not this time. She must face what she has created, Caroline said. Her eyes carried both guilt and resolve. We parted not as allies, but as women who finally understood the cost of cushioning other people's falls. Back in my hotel room, I spread documents across the desk like puzzle pieces. Deeds, transfers, contracts, receipts, each aligned under Grace's instruction. The television hummed with wedding day chaos, showing guests stranded in the Riverbend parking lot, women in stilettos teetering on hot asphalt, children crying near minivans. Commentators debated whether the reception's cancellation was cruelty or courage. I muted the volume. I already knew. My phone rattled again. Ethan. I ignored it. Some messages deserved to rot unheard. I opened the window slightly, letting June air slip in heavy with magnolia and exhaust. The binder rested on the desk like a silent ally. When Grace finally called, her tone was brisk, certain. Monday, 2 p.m., my office. If they want options, they'll come. I closed the binder with a satisfying snap, slid Ortiz's card beside it, and exhaled. For the first time in years, my life resembled a table set properly. Documents stacked, cutlery aligned, no one daring to reach across and snatch the meal before it was served. I thought about Daniel, about the decades when we balanced checkbooks at the kitchen table, his handwriting looping across ledger lines, his belief that order and honesty would always protect us. I had honored that faith by keeping every receipt, every stub, every bank slip. Now those habits, once mocked as fussy, were the backbone of my defense. I thought about Daniel, about the decades when we balanced checkbooks at the kitchen table, his handwriting looping across ledger lines, his belief that order and honesty would always protect us. I had honored that faith by keeping every receipt, every stub, every bank slip. Now those habits, once mocked as fussy, were the backbone of my defense. I thought about Daniel, about the decades when we balanced checkbooks at the kitchen table, his handwriting looping across ledger lines, his belief that order and honesty would always protect us. I had honored that faith by keeping every receipt, every stub, every bank slip. Now those habits, once mocked as fussy, were the backbone of my defense. I thought about Daniel, about the decades when we balanced checkbooks at the kitchen table, his handwriting looping across ledger lines, his belief that order and honesty would always protect us. I had honored that faith by keeping every receipt, every stub, every bank slip. Now those habits, once mocked as fussy, were the backbone of my defense. I thought about Daniel, about the decades when we balanced checkbooks at the kitchen table, his handwriting looping across ledger lines, his belief that order and honesty would always protect us. I had honored that faith by keeping every receipt, every stub, every bank slip. Now those habits, once mocked as fussy, were the backbone of my defense. I thought about Daniel, about the decades when we balanced checkbooks at the kitchen table, his handwriting looping across ledger lines, his belief that order and honesty would always protect us. I had honored that faith by keeping every receipt, every stub, every bank slip. Now those habits, once mocked as fussy, were the backbone of my defense. I thought about Daniel, about the decades when we balanced checkbooks at the kitchen table, his handwriting looping across ledger lines, his belief that order and honesty would always protect us. I had honored that faith by keeping every receipt, every stub, every bank slip. Now those habits, once mocked as fussy, were the backbone of my defense. Budgets don't care who wore white. They only care who pays interest. The line kept ticking in my head as I rode the elevator up to Grace Park's office, watching rain race down the tall glass like gray ribbons being unspooled. I shifted my leather bag, documents, receipts, the stubborn brass key, and reminded myself that Monday wasn't here to be kind. It was here to be clear. Grace's conference room smelled faintly of lemon oil and copy toner. A carafe of lemon water sweated on the polished table, the condensation forming small moons under the slices. She already had a yellow legal pad out, glasses low on her nose, pen aligned with military neatness. "We'll keep this orderly," she said. "Facts first, feelings after." I took the chair opposite her and laid the binder down so its spine made a modest, satisfying click. Ethan and Sloane arrived in a gust of damp air and tension. Sloane wore a cream blouse that tried for bridle in case anyone had forgotten her preferred narrative. Ethan clutched a pocket calculator the way a swimmer clutches a floater. They didn't look at me. Grace gestured for all of us to sit. She didn't waste the room's oxygen. "Two paths," she said, uncapping her pen. "Option 1. You buy out Marion's 35% share. Current market value puts that near $100,000. Option 2. The house goes on the market and the proceeds are split according to ownership. Either choice is lawful. Either choice ends the stalemate." The words landed with the weight of a gavel. Sloane's mouth thinned. Ethan started punching at the calculator as if it might produce a miracle if he pressed hard enough. Grace opened a folder thick with documents. On top lay something I recognized at once, the fridge magnet seating chart, rescued from their kitchen and now annotated in Grace's square hand. Beside each vendor she had written, "Who paid?" Caterer, Marion. Photographer, Marion. Florist, Marion. Reception hall, Marion. The page looked like a tally of candles blown out by the same breath. Next came the statements. "Restaurants, $400 monthly," Grace read, tapping the line with metronome precision. "Memberships, $150. Streaming services, 3 platforms. Late fees, recurring. Travel, aspirational." She slid a color-coded sheet across the table. "This is a budget autopsy. It reveals cause of death." Sloane twisted a tissue until it became a string. "We've had a rough year," she murmured. Grace didn't look up. "Rough years don't swipe platinum," she said, not unkind, simply true. Ethan cleared his throat. "We've been under pressure." "Pressure doesn't change math," Grace said. "It only changes tone." She capped her pen and let the quiet settle. I kept my hands folded and my mouth still. Paper had a better memory than I did. It also didn't argue. Outside, thunder rolled against the windows in long, exhausted waves. I touched the brass key in my jacket pocket, letting its edges press into my palm, a small reminder that ownership isn't a feeling, it's a file. Ethan finally met my eye. "Mom," he said carefully, "maybe we could do a payment plan? Buy you out over time. Monthly transfers, interest if you want." He glanced at Sloane, who nodded too quickly. Grace answered before I had to. "A plan requires trust, collateral, and a track record," she said. "You have a house you can't afford and a record of late fees." She turned the lemon slices with her pen, a quiet orbit. "What you are asking for is grace without terms." Sloane's voice sharpened. "This is punitive. She's my mother-in-law." She avoided my name like it had become a fee. Grace kept her gaze steady. "It's property law. No punishment. Only partitions." Ethan went back to the calculator, the screen casting a faint green over his hands. $2,400 for the mortgage. 2 car payments. Utilities. Groceries. Credit cards that had turned minimums into lifestyle. Numbers marched across the display and then ran out of places to go. He set it down, and for a heartbeat, the room had only rain and breath. Grace slid a new document forward, square in the center of the table so no one could pretend it wasn't there. "Notice of intent to sell," she said, If you refuse to choose, the court will. The paper sat like a third presence, polite and unstoppable. You'll have 30 days to make a decision and to demonstrate capacity to execute it. Sloane stared at the notice as if the font might blink first. What if we can't afford either? She whispered, the tissue thinning between her fingers. What if we just need time? Grace folded her hands. Time is a choice disguised as weather. It still moves the same. She looked at me. Marion? I spoke without ornament. I won't fund disrespect. I will honor documents. My voice surprised me with how level it felt, as though it had been practicing in secret for this exact room. Ethan's shoulders sagged. For a second, I saw the boy who once saved allowance for a used bike, who asked his father how to reset a circuit breaker. Then, the moment passed, replaced by the man who had learned to treat bills like rumors. He rubbed his forehead and nodded, a gesture that looked like surrender borrowing the shape of agreement. Grace summarized in clean lines. If they qualified for a loan, they could buy me out. If they didn't, the house would list. She noted right of first refusal, closing costs, the mechanics of escrow. The language was dry as unbuttered toast and exactly what the moment required. Courts respond to clarity, she said. Let's give them some. I closed my binder. Its clasp clicked like a period. The rain intensified, drumming the glass with a rhythm that sounded almost like applause. Sloane dabbed at eyes that still refused tears. Ethan gathered loose receipts he had brought in a sandwich bag. Thin paper, greasy corners, a history of small avoidances. Grace placed them beside the statements. They looked embarrassed to be seen. 30 days, Grace repeated. You may contact me through email for documents. Do not contact Marion except in writing about house logistics. No more midnight calls. She turned to me. You'll receive copies of everything. I nodded. Copies meant everyone would have to read the same page. We stood. Chairs whispered against the carpet. The lemon water was nearly gone. Rind and pulp stranded like pale confetti at the bottom of the carafe. Sloane's cream blouse had wilted into damp pleats. Ethan tucked the calculator into his jacket pocket as if he feared someone might repossess even that small hope. We walked to the door together and then not together at all. In the elevator lobby, Sloane finally said my name. Marion. She pronounced all 3 syllables like a password she no longer knew where to enter. This will ruin us. I pressed the down button. No, I said. This will teach you. The elevator chimed. The doors opened on our reflections, 4 people edited by glass and weather, and then on nothing but the box we each had to ride alone. As the elevator descended, the brass key was warm in my pocket, a small sun against the storm. Budgets don't care who wore white. They care who pays. Outside, rain hammered Broad Street, wipers beat time, and somewhere a florist checked a ledger and drew a careful line through an order that had been paid in full. Contracts don't tremble. People do. That was the line circling in my head as the elevator doors opened onto the 12th floor of Grace Park Law. The building's tall windows were lashed with rain. Richmond blurred outside like a watercolor rinsed too soon. Inside, the blinds quivered with the hum of air conditioning, and the conference table stretched polished and unforgiving. Yellow legal pads lined up like disciplined soldiers, ready to record the undoing of illusions. My brass key rested beside the deed copy on Grace's desk, glowing under the desk lamp like a coin that refused to be ignored. It was silent proof that leverage lives in paperwork, not in pleading. Grace stood when I entered, precise as ever, her charcoal suit pressed into perfect lines. We'll keep this orderly, she said. She gestured to the center of the table where the deed lay open, highlighted, annotated. A thin manila envelope sat beneath it like a waiting verdict. I took my seat, steady, while rain tapped insistently on the glass behind her. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and printer ink, the scent of seriousness. Everything about the space whispered structure, consequence, and the impossibility of pretending otherwise. The door opened again. Ethan and Sloane entered together, a mismatched parade. His tie crooked, her mascara bleeding into fragile smudges. They were damp from the storm, but more than rain clung to them. They settled into chairs opposite me without a word of greeting. No hug, no smile. Just the scrape of chairs and the silent accusation of their eyes. Bridesmaids' chatter was replaced now with heavy air, the kind that fills a courtroom just before a verdict. The blinds swayed faintly, as though they too shivered with the storm. "Let's anchor ourselves in facts," Grace began. Her voice carried no tremor. She slid the deed into the center like a card played face up. Co-owner, 35%. Each syllable was deliberate. The words landed heavier than the storm. Ethan's eyes widened. Sloane's pen twitched in her hand. Silence swelled, broken only by the rain pressing its case against the windows. The brass key glowed in quiet agreement. Ethan finally spoke, voice raised as if louder meant truer. "The 87,000 was a gift. She insisted on helping us. We never expected repayment." His tone strained with the bravado of someone fighting a losing cause. He looked not at me, but at Grace, as though I had already been written off. Grace didn't blink. She lifted the mortgage packet, page marked with fluorescent tabs. "Her name appears as borrower. Equity has no room for wishful memory. A gift doesn't carry signatures across promissory lines. This isn't about intention, it's about law." She folded her hands. "Law isn't sentimental." Her tone was matter-of-fact, almost kind in its sharpness, like a surgeon cutting to heal. The words were scalpel and shield. The brass key reflected lamplight. I let the silence work. Sloane drew a shallow breath, setting her pen down with a metallic click. "This is family," she said. "Family shouldn't need contracts," Grace replied evenly. "Contracts prevent family from sinking when sentiment fails." She turned to me. "Marion?" I spoke slowly. "I'm willing to discount my share to 75,000, but only if conditions are met. A job secured in 60 days, monthly financial check-ins for 2 years, no new revolving debt." My voice did not rise. It held steady like the rain, relentless and measured. Sloane gave a sharp laugh, the kind meant to cover panic. "That's financial prison." "Accountability," I answered. "Prisons are built from secrecy. These rules are daylight." I saw her flinch, not at the number, but at the idea of sunlight in her habits. Ethan leaned forward, calculator screen glowing in his palm like an ember. "Please, Mom, a payment plan. We'll send transfers every month. Add interest if you want. Just don't push us out." I looked at him, the boy who once asked me to check under his bed for monsters. "You've defaulted on gratitude," I said. "Why would I trust you with a loan?" The words stilled him, folding his shoulders inward. For a moment, even the storm seemed to pause. Grace slid the manila envelope into the light. The label read, "Notice of intent to sell." She placed it gently, as though heavy paper could still bruise. "2 choices," she said. "Buy her share, or the house is listed. If you refuse, the court will choose." Thunder responded, applause without joy, as if the sky itself sided with order. Sloane's pen fell, clattering like a verdict. Ethan's jaw set tight. The storm outside rose to a steady roar, windows alive with water. The key gleamed against the desk lamp, indifferent to tears or silence. I felt strangely calm, as if the storm inside me had passed to the windows instead. Grace continued, tone precise. "Conditions for the discount must be notarized. Any violation, new debt, missed statements, voids the discount. The balance reverts to full market value. You may propose alternatives, but they must hold under scrutiny." She wrote each clause as though carving it into stone. Sloane pushed back. "We're not criminals. Why does this sound like parole?" "Because consequences always sound harsh to those unaccustomed to them," Grace said. She turned the calculator toward Ethan. At it again, line by line, numbers filled the screen. Mortgage, utilities, car notes, streaming fees, credit cards. Rain hammered a rhythm. Ethan rubbed his forehead as totals mounted. The math was merciless. He whispered, "We can't stretch it." His voice cracked, the way it had when he was 12 and confessed breaking a window. I remembered the boy. I faced the man. "We had a plan," Sloan said. "We thought family meant patience." "Family means respect," I replied. "Patience is a courtesy, not an entitlement." I could feel Daniel's photograph from the old house watching in memory, reminding me that dignity is not optional. My hand pressed the key harder in my pocket, an anchor of brass. Grace summarized crisply. "You have 30 days. Secure financing, sell assets, or list the property. No midnight phone calls, no emotional theatrics. All correspondence routes through this office." She slid Detective Ortiz's card across the table. "And if intimidation arises, you contact him." Ethan nodded faintly. Sloan stayed rigid, mascara rings marking her exhaustion. The brass key seemed to hum in my pocket, proof of leverage earned, not gifted. For the first time, the weight felt protective, not burdensome. The storm could rage. I was no longer its victim. "If we work your plan," Ethan said, voice cracking. "If Sloan gets the job, if we keep the rules, will you accept the discount?" "Yes," I said. "If not, we sell. Either way, accountability lives here." My words felt like a final chord, resonant, undeniable. Grace stacked the pads, capped her pen. The click rang final. Chairs scraped as we stood. The blinds rattled, thunder groaned. Sloan turned at the doorway, mascara streaked but chin lifted. "You'll regret humiliating us," she said. "I'll regret nothing," I answered. "Regret belongs to those who squander respect." Grace opened the door. Rain darkened the hallway windows, downtown blurred in gray sheets. 30 days, she repeated, final as ink. The notice lay on the table, waiting like a storm that would not pass without reckoning. I thought of the years I had carried this family like groceries across a wet parking lot, arms aching, balance precarious, but still moving forward because no one else volunteered. I remembered Daniel's voice reminding me that paperwork is dignity on file, that signatures are small anchors holding storms at bay. I recalled nights when I signed checks under dim light, believing that generosity was its own protection. Now those same papers defended me when love failed. The rain outside was only weather, but in here, it was metaphor. Relentless, cleansing, without negotiation. And for the first time in years, I trusted the storm to leave me stronger than before. Independence doesn't announce itself. It shows up in pay stubs. That thought carried me through July heat as I returned to my Hampton Inn suite, where the air conditioner clicked and hummed against Virginia's humidity. The small table near the window had become my command center. Folders stacked, laptop humming, receipts squared like soldiers awaiting inspection. Even in the impersonality of hotel furniture, I carved a rhythm, a reminder that order was possible while chaos raged outside. Scene 1 arrived in the form of a knock. Ethan stood at the door, eyes ringed with fatigue, shirt untucked, an envelope clutched like contraband. When I opened, he stepped inside, dropping a stack of bills onto the desk. Utilities past due, credit cards edged with red letters, the mortgage notice like a fist. "Mom," he began, voice already fraying. "We're drowning." I looked at the pile, but did not reach for it. I folded my hands instead. "You wanted adulthood," I said. "It collects its own mail." The words were deliberate, steady. He searched my face for a softness I no longer offered. Silence stretched, filled only by the rattle of the ice machine in the hallway. For years, I had rescued him from lateness and excuses. This time, I let the paper sit, mute witnesses to consequence. Ethan gathered them back, each envelope louder in retreat than in arrival. Later that week, Caroline invited me to her porch. The shade of her old oak tree covered wicker chairs, and glasses of iced tea sweated rings onto the table between us. Sloane's mother had once been her enabler. Now her spine had straightened. "If you hold the line," she reminded me, "she may finally grow up." Caroline's voice was calm, but steel lived underneath. She had refused Sloane's requests for another check. "Respect earns support, not tantrums," she said, her eyes steady over the rim of her glass. Cicadas buzzed like an electrical wire. I watched condensation slide down the glass and collect on a paper napkin, a small tideline of discipline. She asked how I was sleeping. "Better," I admitted. The truth felt like a clean sheet pulled tight. "I miss the old house," I added, "but I don't miss tiptoeing around my own kitchen." Caroline nodded, the porch fan stirring wisps of her hair. "Boundaries sound harsh to the people who need them most," she said. "Keep them anyway." We sat in companionable quiet, both listening to summer and to the way silence can make a lesson ring louder. Scene 3 was not mine to witness directly. Word arrived like a telegram. Sloane had taken a seat in a dental office waiting room, resume printed on decent paper, perfume competing with antiseptic. She had smoothed her blouse and smiled for the receptionist. She had met the office manager in a cramped room lined with tooth models and appointment calendars. She had answered questions without embroidery. She had not dazzled, but she had shown up. Hours later, my phone buzzed. A message appeared. A photo of her first pay stub. Next to it, 5 words. "I worked. Here's proof." No emojis, no gloss. Just ink on paper, net pay circled in ballpoint. Independence had crept in through the side door and taken a chair. I stared at that photo longer than I admitted. The stub was humble, but it glowed brighter than her wedding gown ever had. Proof that paper walls of excuses could crumble, replaced by paper that actually counted. I thought of my own first job, the diner coffee I refilled until midnight, the way a paycheck felt like permission to be a person who could decide. It is a private coronation, that first slip of paper with your effort folded into numbers. It doesn't need a speech. It only needs deposit ink and a quiet smile. Back at the hotel, I sorted receipts into tidy stacks. The habit felt less like compulsion and more like stewardship. My laptop chimed with one of Grace's clipped updates: documents received, records logged, timeline satisfied. She never used exclamation marks. She didn't need them. Her punctuation was accuracy. The ice bucket sweated on the dresser. I refreshed my inbox, then let the screen dim. Ethan texted again, a photo of unopened envelopes gathered on his kitchen counter. The granite I chose with my money was now a stage for consequence. "We're trying," he wrote. I typed and deleted 3 replies before sending one sentence: "Try with budgets, not apologies." He did not answer for an hour. When he did, it was only, "Okay." 2 days later, he appeared in person, less combative, more human. He held a legal pad with columns: income, expenses, the kind of math that stops guessing and starts telling the truth. "Sloane has interviews," he said. "I've canceled 2 subscriptions and sold the golf clubs." I nodded. "Keep going." It felt good to use 2 words instead of 2,000. Caroline called to report that she had intercepted another ask from her daughter. "I told her no," she said, steady as the porch rail. "I told her respect earned support." She exhaled into the receiver, an air of mourning and resolve mingled. "Maybe we both made this mess by cushioning her fall for too long. Today I put away the pillows." I thanked her. She laughed softly. "Don't thank me yet. Maturity is a long commute." That evening, I walked the hallway of the hotel like it was a short pilgrimage, counting soft carpet squares, letting the air smell like chlorine and coffee. I thought about the odd tenderness of starting over at this age, the way a quiet room becomes a teacher. I thought about Daniel's careful ledgers and the steadiness they taught my hands. Paper kept people from drowning, that was his phrase. Maybe paper could also teach swimming. Near midnight, another photo arrived from Sloane. Her new desk, a jar of pens, a scheduling screen open to a week of appointments. Beneath it, a message. Training is hard. I typed back. Learning is hard. Keep going. No lecture, no long paragraph about gratitude. Only a small door left open for her to walk through under her own power. At breakfast the next morning, I stirred hotel oatmeal and read the local news on my phone. The storm had blown out. Sun struck wet pavement into mirrors. An email from Grace landed while I was noticing the light. Subject: conditional buyout. The body was plain as a ledger. They've agreed to terms. Ready to file? My fingers hovered above the keys. I could have typed yes fast. Instead, I closed the laptop and listened to the quiet. The air conditioner sighed. Somewhere a housekeeping cart rattled. I let the moment breathe. Paper had carried us here. Paper would carry us forward. I thought again about the meaning of paper. Bills were paper, warnings printed in red. Checks were paper, gifts I once wrote. Now a pay stub was paper, proof of effort. Paper could imprison, but it could also free. Caroline's iced tea rings marked paper napkins, circles fading, but evidence that time had passed. Ethan's envelopes had weight, not in grams, but in shame. My own notes in Grace's binder were paper armor, thin yet protective. Again and again, I traced the edges of these metaphors, realizing that every choice was a page turned, every silence an unwritten line. Independence did not roar. It printed itself slowly, character by character, like ink across a ledger. Top of form. At 64, freedom arrived disguised as a lease agreement. I signed my name in black ink on cream-colored paper at the leasing office of Riverside Commons, a senior community tucked near the James River. The pen shook slightly, not because I doubted my choice, but because the act itself felt like a declaration. My life, my rules, my space. The lease folder slid across the desk, stamped and dated, and I carried it home like a trophy no one else could claim. My apartment was modest, 2 bedrooms, white walls, carpet soft under my bare feet, but the balcony became my sanctuary. Rosemary, thyme, and basil grew in ceramic pots lined along the railing. In the mornings, I brushed my fingers across the leaves, releasing fragrance that clung to my skin longer than perfume. Neighbors' laughter floated up from the pool, a reminder that life could be noisy without being cruel. Flyers from the community center, book club, yoga, a garden shift, stacked on my counter. Invitations to a life unburdened. The brass key dangled above my desk on a satin ribbon. It once opened Ethan and Sloane's front door. Now it hung in plain sight, not as a tool, but as a warning. Some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. One afternoon in early spring, a knock came at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Sloane clutching a plastic container, steam fogging its lid. She stood awkwardly, hair pulled back, no makeup. When I opened the door, her voice wavered. "I brought spaghetti, homemade. I thought you might like dinner." I let her in. The sauce smelled of garlic and too much oregano, but the effort mattered more than the flavor. She set the container on my table, then sat with her shoulders tight. Her fingers traced circles on the condensation. Finally, she said, "I treated you like an ATM. Worse, like you were disposable." I was cruel. I studied her face. For once, no performance, no plastic smile, just exhaustion and shame. I didn't rush to answer. Silence made her fidget, but it also made space for sincerity. At last, I nodded. You were. Her eyes shimmered. I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I just wanted you to know I see it now. We ate spaghetti from my plain bowls. The sauce was watery, the noodles clumped, but I chewed slowly, grateful for what the meal symbolized. Effort, humility, a first step. When she left, she hugged me stiffly, like someone relearning the act. Later that evening, my phone rang. Ethan's number glowed across the screen. I answered cautiously. His voice was softer than I remembered. Mom, I wanted to say thank you. For what? For not rescuing us. It sounds backward, but we're learning. We cook at home. We track bills. Sloane's working part-time. It's rough, but it's ours. I sat at my balcony table, phone warm against my ear, city lights scattering across the water. That's what adults do, Ethan. They live within their means. I know. I didn't realize how much you shielded us. I'm sorry. Apologies from him were rare, like eclipses. I let it linger. I hope you mean that. I do, and I hope maybe we can start over. Start over doesn't mean erase. It means rebuild, slowly. We said goodnight. I hung up, staring at the herbs swaying gently in the evening breeze. Weeks passed with a new rhythm. Morning coffee on the balcony. Tuesdays at book club, where Margaret from 3B recommended mystery novels that kept me awake later than intended. Fridays on garden shift. Dirt under my nails, sun on my shoulders. I no longer measured worth in checks written or sacrifices made. I measured it in laughter during community potlucks, in pages turned at midnight, in the taste of my own herbs folded into scrambled eggs. Sloane visited again, this time without food. She carried only a photo, her first pay stub. Net pay small, but hers. She handed it to me like evidence in court. See, I worked. I held the slip carefully, paper thin, yet heavier than any wedding bill I had ever covered. I believe you, I said. She smiled weakly, but there was pride tucked in the corners. One Sunday, Ethan called after dinner. We're still behind, but we're not drowning. We're talking more, not yelling. Thank you for pushing us. I leaned back, watching the sky darken to navy. I didn't push you. I stepped back. You did the rest. Still, he said, thank you. In May, they asked if I would meet them for lunch. Not at the old house, not with talk of money, but at a diner off Broad Street. I agreed, with one condition: public setting, my terms. I would share a meal, not a bank account. That lunch was tentative but real. Sloane asked about my book club. Ethan asked about my garden shift. I answered, careful yet open. We laughed once, a short burst, but genuine. It felt like planting seeds in uncertain soil. Maybe nothing would grow. Maybe everything. That night, back in my apartment, I closed the balcony door against the spring chill. The brass key glinted on its ribbon, catching the last thread of sunset. I whispered to myself, the best gift is knowing my worth. I no longer waited for their approval, their gratitude, or their love to validate me. My lease, my herbs, my friends, my freedom, these were proof enough. Family ties could fray, mend, or redefine, but self-worth was non-negotiable. At 64, I had not disappeared. I had arrived. As I closed the balcony door and saw the old brass key glinting on its ribbon, I realized freedom wasn't about leaving. It was about setting boundaries while still keeping love alive. In this life, if we pause long enough to listen and respect each other, affection can turn into a bridge instead of a wall. I've learned that gratitude and dignity build stronger homes than any check ever could. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your reflections. Share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments. Bottom of form.